Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm Ruchira Banka. I'm an educator for around 2 decades now, focused on working with spreading skill based education. And on behalf of Shimanli, I would like to welcome each one of you for this webinar. Thanks for sparing this time and joining it for the growth of the students. I believe building connections and collaborations is a quite wonderful way to bring desired changes to the complete education system. And I'm happy to announce that Shimanli is a key contributor to the same. Shimanli carries the mission to prepare students for the unexpected, prepare them to with skills to deal with any unfamiliar situations that they come across, and make them future ready. And as a part of this big mission, Shimanli believes in providing the best professional development resources for teachers as well. And one such is today's such webinar, where we are going to talk about the concept of surveillance when examining the experiences of international students. We have with us Dr. Bonike today. She's happily agreed to lead the webinar for the day. A little bit introduction about herself. She's an international educator with over 21 years of experience in higher education administration. For the first 20 years of her career, she served at a community college in roles ranging from campus dean, campus vice president, campus president, provost, and vice chancellor. She currently serves as the director of international student services at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. In her role, she oversees and manages services and programs that support the needs of international students. Dr. Bonike graduated with her doctorate degree in community college leadership from Kansas State University, master's degree in business administration from Northwood University, and bachelor's degree in psychology from Boy State University. She's married with 8 children and lives in New Hartford, New York. And we're glad to have her here on this platform. Let us all benefit from the vast experience that she carries to know about the concept of surveillance, explore the implications and strategies, and discuss actions for support and empowerment. Thanks, Dr. Bonike, for sparing this time. Early morning for you, I understand. Over to you. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Utreya. I welcome all of you to this seminar today or webinar today. We'll get right into it. The title again is The Concept of Surveillance when Examining Experiences of International Students. Sorry, I'm trying to change okay. So we did that. So this webinar is going to introduce the concept of surveillance and how we understand the experiences of international students. It's going to raise questions about power dynamics and discrimination and impact of international students. And we're going to highlight the needs for institutions and host countries to create a supportive environment for these students. 3 objectives that I have today is to increase your awareness and understanding, also explore the implications and challenges that we face, and then promote strategies for support. So when we talk about surveillance, a general definition of surveillance is the systematic monitoring of individuals or groups for the purpose of information gathering. Think about it as you're in a room and you know that there's a camera in there, something that's watching, not necessarily watching you, but you're aware that there's a surveillance going on. And think about how that may affect your behavior. So to introduce this topic, I'm going to start with where the idea came from. The idea came from a French philosopher, Michel Foucault, Foucault. And his perspective on surveillance is deeply intertwined with his concept of power and discipline in his work. He had a book called Discipline and Punishment. And for Foucault, surveillance is not merely an act of watching or monitoring, but a mechanism of power in a way that it operates within a network of relations, shaping individuals' behavior and social interactions. Again, think about it as you are in a room and you have a camera. Because you're aware that the camera is there, your behavior is altered. Even if your intent was never to do anything bad, the fact that you know that there's a camera there, your behavior is automatically altered. Foucault introduced the idea of panopticon. It's like a theoretical prison design where inmates are constantly visible to a central watchtower, symbolizing a pervasive nature of surveillance in a modern society. Foucault analysis of surveillance extends beyond the prison, suggesting that similar mechanisms operate in various institutions, such as schools. It operates in hospitals, in factories. It contributes to a creation of docile bodies that are easily controlled and regulated. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but I do know that in the United States, where I'm presenting from, the mere fact that when you're driving on a freeway and you see a police car, they're not chasing you. A police car is just parked there. Your speed automatically goes down, right? So we become regulated by these surveillance method. So surveillance plays a significant role in shaping the experiences also of international students, and it impacts various aspects of their lives. So we're going to talk about three types of surveillances. Institutional surveillance. We're going to talk about examples that include monitoring academic performance and attendance tracking or compliance with visa regulations. We're going to talk about government surveillance, the government monitoring international students through visa processes, immigration policies, and security measures. And then societal surveillance, which includes attitudes and perceptions that we have that subjects international students to scrutiny and judgment based just on their nationalities. So what are the effects of surveillance? Surveillance has a psychological effect. The constant surveillance can contribute to feelings of stress, anxiety, or alienation among international students. It also causes an erosion of trust. Surveillance practices can erode trust between international students and institution or host communities, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about the impacts of surveillance. So the impact on surveillance on behavior and freedom of international students can be profound. Constant monitoring tends to alter how students act, often leading to self-censorship. For remember the example I gave you of a traffic, while the police officer is sitting there, they're not bothering you, but you automatically control yourself, you censor yourself, you slow down because you don't want to be stopped by the police. That's the same concept with international students. So it leads to self-censorship. They avoid certain discussions or activities that are culturally or politically sensitive. We have several examples here in the US with the war in the Middle East. International students try not to have that conversation at all. Even though I think in an education institution, that conversation can be good because, ideas can come out of those type of conversations, but because it can be culturally or politically sensitive, international students tend to censor themselves and don't participate in those type of conversations. This can stifle the open mind and free exchange of ideas, which is cornerstone of higher education overall. Moreover, surveillance can impinge upon the sense of personal freedom and privacy. And it often makes students, it makes it difficult for them to express their opinion or engage in activities outside of their academic responsibilities. It can also heighten anxiety or stress levels, knowing that their actions may be watched or judged, not just by the institution, but potentially by their home or their host government, okay? This environment can potentially distract from the richness of their educational and cultural exchange experience. I remember under the previous US administration, there was a case of a student who liked a post on Facebook. He didn't make the post, he liked the post while he was in his home country. When he got to the airport, during that previous administration, they had the right to take your phone and go through your phone for international students. And they found on the social media of that student, the post that the student liked, which was anti-American. That student was not allowed entry into the US. So this is part of the surveillance that we're talking about that can negatively affect students. Also, surveillance as employed by educational institutions, governments, or societal frameworks can significantly influence the experiences of international students. It's almost often implemented as a means to monitor compliance with visa regulations, academic integrity, campus safety protocols. That's the idea that we say we use when we're employing surveillance. So on one hand, Surveillance can ensure the security and proper integration of students into the educational system or societal norms. But on the other hand, it can create an atmosphere of distrust and unease, potentially hindering the open exchange of ideas and cultural expression, which is fundamental to the international academic experience. Surveillance tools ranging from digital tracking system to CCTV can make international students feel constantly watched, impacting their behavior, social interaction, and even academic performance due to the pressure of continuous scrutiny. The dual-edged impact of surveillance shapes not only their day-to-day life, but also their perception of privacy and freedom in educational setting. And to note, it's not just in America that surveillance takes place. It takes place everywhere. Anywhere that you have protocols and rules that people have to obey, there's some sort of surveillance. But the focus today is on international students that you may have in your classroom. And when you compare them to your regular students, your traditional students, you have to understand the impact that surveillance of all forms has on international students and how that can affect stress in their lives. The impact of surveillance also on the behavior and freedom of international students can be profound. Constant monitoring tends to alter how students act, often leading to, like I said earlier, self-censorship. And they're not able to exchange ideas in a classroom where you require participation of students, but students don't want to participate because they're not quite sure if this falls under some kind of censorship that they're constantly under. So we have a case study. Let's look at institutional surveillance as faced by international students, such as mandatory reporting requirements for academic progress. In the US, we have a system called SEVIS. And in SEVIS, we have to enter information about all international students that are on our campus. So this surveillance targets international students. It's like tracking and monitoring their visa status and attendance as part of maintaining their legal status in the US. Excuse me. So many countries require education institutions to keep detailed records of international students' attendance, their academic progress, and if they are adhering to the rules of their visas. So for instance, in the United States, like I said, institutions are required to report into this system we call SEVIS, which is a web-based system for maintaining information on international students. So if a student falls out of status, for example, by not enrolling in a full course of study or not attending classes regularly or working without authorization, then the institution must report this to US government, which could result in the student's visa being revoked. Such surveillance mechanism ensures that international students comply with the conditions of their visa, but it can also create a feeling of being under constant scrutiny, which can add pressure to the already challenging experience of studying abroad. This can influence their academic choices, social interactions, and their willingness to seek help when they need it for fear of negative implications on their visa status. In terms of another case study is the government surveillance measures, such as visa restrictions or security screenings, and their impact on the experiences of international students. I gave an example earlier that at the airport where this student's cell phone was examined at the airport, and these are government officials that are going through the student's phone, which at the time, and I'm pretty sure it still happens, where international students are subjected to different scrutiny. So we'll look at it as a government surveillance. A notable example of government surveillance of international students is the requirement for them to register with a government authority upon arrival in the host country. For example, in the United Kingdom, international students from certain countries are required to register with the police within a specified period of their arrival. Additionally, in countries like the United States, international students on student visas are subject to the SEVIS system, which tracks and monitors their enrollment, their course load, their address, employment authorization, even changes to the academic major or degree program is monitored. SEVIS is a direct way for the government in the US to exercise oversight and ensure that visa conditions are being met. In China, there are instances where international students must comply with strict residence registration protocols with the local police, and they're subject to surveillance measures that might include monitoring of their movements and activities. These systems, like I said earlier, serves a dual purpose. They help maintain national security, which we need, and ensure that international students are in compliance with immigration laws. However, they also make international students' presence and activities more visible to the government, potentially affecting their privacy and freedom of movement. And the final case study I want to share with you is societal surveillance, which we normally don't think about, but it's like discrimination or stereotyping based on nationality and its effect on international students' sense of belonging. That is huge. Societal surveillance refers to what occurs within the fabric of society, often by citizens themselves, or by social norms and expectations rather than formal institution of government. So now we're not even talking about schools. We're not even talking about government. We're talking about you and I, right? As regular citizens of the country, whether in the United States, whether in India, whether in China, it doesn't matter. But as a society, we also do surveillance. We don't think about it in that way. A common example of societal surveillance would be a neighborhood watch program, where community members monitor their surroundings and report suspicious activities to the authorities. While not always formalized, there's an understood vigilance that residents are expected to maintain and ensure community safety. In the digital age, societal surveillance includes phenomena like social media scrutiny. People's behavior, opinion, personal lives are often observed and judged by their peers on platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So while we think these are social media tools, they can create a form of surveillance where individuals feel pressure to present themselves in a certain way to maintain their social standing and avoid negative judgment. I have a social media account, but I have two. I have one with a pseudonym that's a name that's not attached to me, where I can be myself. Then I have a professional one that has my name, my title, where I work. And my behavior on both are very different. Not that I do anything inappropriate on the social one, but that's my social life. And to avoid negative judgment, then I have a professional one where students that follow me see the real me, okay? And a lot of people do that. Or some people just don't join social media at all. For international students though, societal surveillance can manifest through peer monitoring of academic settings, such as classmates observing and commenting on their language skills, cultural practices, social interactions. I've had situations where students would say, well, nobody understands me when I talk because I have an accent. Or you have students that say, I don't understand that teacher because they have a very strong accent. These are all surveillance, societal surveillance. It can also occur in public spaces where people might feel watched or judged based on their appearance or their behavior, which may differ from the local norms, you know? This societal gaze can significantly impact an international student's experience, and it can contribute to a sense of being an outsider and influence their behavior and integration into the host culture. I see this all the time with international students here. When they get here, we try to make sure we let them know that in order to foster a sense of belonging, it requires effort on the part of the student and the part of the institution. But international students tend to find it very difficult to find a sense of belonging when they constantly feel like they're being watched by the type of food they eat, how the food smells, how they dress. I used to work at a place where when I want my food for lunch, I have coworkers saying, oh my God, what is that smell? So it prevents me from wanting to bring food to work for fear that people are going to be talking or commenting about the food. Those are considered societal gaze. So even as an adult, we feel it. So you should just imagine what international students in your classrooms or at your institutions may feel. So now that we know we have this problem, as educators, what can we do to mitigate this to advocate for policies that prioritize privacy and autonomy at educational institutions? Okay, so I'm going to start with educational institutions because we're all educators. So let's start with ourselves first. Educational institutions, about the impact of surveillance on international students and advocating for policies that prioritize privacy. So I think as an educator, and I've been an educator for over 21 years, I think we need to raise awareness. We need to start by informing the student body and faculty about the importance of privacy and autonomy and the potential risk of excessive surveillance. This can be done through workshops, seminars, and information campaigns. We have a lot of work to do as international educators. We're not just only educating students, we're educating our peers. Then we need to gather support. How about we build a coalition of stakeholders who are affected by or care about these issues? These can include students, parents, faculty, privacy advocates, and support can be rallied through petitions, social media campaigns, or public forum. Let's use social media to our advantage. We can also, I think about policy review and recommendations. So it's not enough to say we have a problem. Let's present that we have a problem and these are recommendations that we're making. Let's analyze the current policies that we have at our institution and identify areas that may need change. Then we can develop a set of recommended policy changes that balance safety and security with privacy and autonomy, okay? Because we don't want to come across as saying, no, we should not protect national security. No, we should, okay? But we need to be able to balance that. So we need to develop a set of recommendations that should be based on best practice and expert consultations, okay? We don't know it all, so let's hire people that do know, and let them consult for us and give us ideas. Let's engage with decision makers. Let's engage in a dialogue with institution, the administration, the board members, the policymakers of the institution. Let's present recommended policy changes, and advocate for their adoption. And this step requires persistent effort and negotiation, right? So just because we make a recommendation doesn't mean that we're not going to get pushback. We're going to get pushback, but we need to be persistent as educators. Then let's leverage legal framework. We can always leverage that. Understand and reference legal protections for privacy and personal freedom that may exist in the jurisdiction of the institution. These can provide a strong backbone for arguments in favor of changing surveillance policies. Then let's do a pilot program, right? So just implementing a pilot program that modifies surveillance practices. Let's collect data and demonstrate how these changes positively impact the campus environment without compromising safety. Then we need continuous feedback, okay? We need to establish mechanisms for ongoing feedback from the community on how these policies are working. And then we use this feedback to make continuous adjustment and improvement. It's an ongoing effort. It's not just a implement and go, it's ongoing. Most importantly, I think we need to be transparent. Let's advocate for transparent policies regarding data collection and use, actually. Institutions should clearly communicate, why is this data being collected? How is this data going to be used? Who will have access to it? So when institutions ask students for personal information and we let students know why we're collecting it, we're putting these students at ease, okay? Then we need to make sure that we ensure that students have direct representation on committees or bodies that decide on surveillance programs. A lot of times, administrators make decisions that affect students, but don't engage the students that it affects, right? We are not students, we've been students, and maybe in our time, things were different. We also understand that times have changed, so it would be inappropriate to make decisions that are going to affect students, but never engage students for their input, okay? I think supporting, the next one, another strategy is supporting international students by providing resources for coping with surveillance-related stress and advocating for their right and dignity. At the end of the day, we do need to protect national security, okay? So we can try counseling services, right? Offering specialized counseling services that help students deal with stress, anxiety, and other mental health issues that may arise from being under surveillance. It is stressful. If you're a student and you know that if you drop a class, somebody's watching. If you don't pass, somebody's watching. If you change your address and forget to notify the office, somebody's watching. It can create stress. And I don't know if you realize that this generation of students are heavy on mental health. So let's not discount it because during our time, we didn't have that problem. We did. Excuse me, we did. It probably didn't have a name called mental health. Maybe we lived in an environment where we said, we just deal with it. We didn't complain about it. This generation of students are very different. They worry about their mental health, and we need to worry about it too, because this generation does not have coping skills that we had. So let's provide counseling services. Let's also provide legal aid. Provide access to legal aid that can inform students of their rights, and then assist them if they feel that those rights are being infringed upon by surveillance practices. Also, let's organize workshops that educate on digital privacy, personal rights, and ways to legally and safely navigate surveillance measures. Maybe we can create support groups, like peer support groups, where students can share their experiences and strategies for dealing with surveillance-related stress. We can distribute clear and accessible information about students' rights and the host country laws different from other countries. So just because something is a right and a right in the US does not mean that when they go to China is a right, or when they go to Africa is a right, or when they go to India is a right. So we need to be able to have information for these students to say, listen, you may be able to do this in your country, but that's a no-no in this country, whatever country we're talking about, okay? Then let's encourage participation in cultural exchange programs, because under cultural exchange programs, it will promote mutual understanding and respect for international students, and helping them to reduce the othering that can accompany surveillance. Here, international students feel like, well, I'm being watched because I'm Indian. I'm being watched because I'm Canadian. Maybe students need to go to study abroad programs or go to other countries and see that surveillance is everywhere, right? And then maybe that can help deal and cope with surveillance. Let's run awareness campaigns that highlight the value and contributions of international students. Let's make them feel important, right? Let's make sure we let them understand that they're not only important to themselves, they're important to us in our countries, okay? And then ensure open channels for communication with university administration for students to report concerns if they receive timely responses regarding surveillance and privacy issues. Then a final idea that I'm thinking we can strategize for mitigation is to promote cultural understanding. Okay, by promoting cultural understanding and acceptance, we'll combat societal surveillance and create a more inclusive environment for international students that can be achieved through a variety of initiatives, like cultural exchange events, host events that celebrate different cultures, allow students to share their heritage and traditions, right? So that when students see a student from another country, they don't say, oh, this student is from Nigeria. Oh man, let me hide my wallet because they're known for fraud, right? Or this student is a Muslim. Oh, let me be safe because, the media have already told us that Muslims are dangerous, right? Or, oh my God, this person is from a country that attacks other people. These are things that the media show. So let's have cultural exchange programs, events on campus. We host these events and allow international students to share their societal cultures. It's important that we develop intercultural workshops. Let's offer workshops that educate all students and staff about cultural differences, stereotypes, and the negative effects of surveillance. These can provide tools for embracing diversity on campuses. Let's have mentoring programs. At Hamilton, like many other schools in the US, we pair international students with domestic students or local families so that we can facilitate personal connections and cultural exchanges. Then let's have language exchange partners, right? Let's encourage language exchange programs where students can learn from each other, fostering a personal relationship and breaking down the language barriers. International students organizations is another thing we can do. Let's support the formation of international student organizations that give students a platform to voice their concerns and experiences. And let's have inclusive policies. Let's work with institutional leadership to develop policies that actively discourage discrimination and targeting of international students. Okay, we need to learn that we need to be inclusive if we want these things to work. Curriculum integration. Integrate international perspectives into the curriculum to help all students gain a broader understanding of the world. We can engage with community, the local community through volunteer work. We did that at Hamilton, where students go out and volunteer in the community and do service, community service projects that include international students, helping them integrate into the local culture. If you're in China, then let the American students there, let them integrate into the culture. Let them serve in the community so they can integrate. Let's have panel discussions and speaker series. Let's organize discussions featuring international students and scholars to speak about their experiences and perspective, right? Let's encourage research on the effects of surveillance on international students and advocate for changes based on research findings. I chose this topic when I was approached because I felt like, you know what, we don't talk about surveillance enough. We just accepted it as a norm, right? But I wanted to use this opportunity to encourage my counterparts, you, my colleagues. Let's do some research on it. Don't just take my word for it. Let's do research on it. That how does surveillance, how does it impact international students? And that research can be done in any country for any level of international students, right? Also on campuses, let's offer services to help mediate cultural misunderstanding that may arise on campus. With everything going on in the world, a lot of campuses in the US are having issues with students, they're having conflict issues on their campuses. First, we had conflicts between Russian students and Ukrainian students on campus. It was tense, right? And we need to, as administrators, we need to be able to have administrators that are skilled in conflict resolutions where they can resolve that conflict in a respectable way, right? And then while we're still dealing with students from Russia and Ukraine on campus, here we go again with students from Israel and students from the Gaza Strip, right? And we have those students on our campuses. And we can't take sides because all students' feelings matter. They're valid. So we need to be able to have conflict resolution services on campus to anticipate that if there's issues in the world, right, that we have people on campus that are skilled to offer services so that we can mediate these misunderstandings. Otherwise, we are going to have a lot of problems on our campuses. I think by implementing these strategies, institutions can help mitigate the negative effects of societal surveillance on international students while promoting a campus culture that values diversity and inclusion. So, to call to action, right? The summary is that I went over key points regarding the concept of surveillance and examining the experience of international students. So now what? Now that I've said we have this problem and this is how it manifests, and these are examples of what campuses should do, then what am I expecting from my colleagues that are tuned in today? I have a call to action to address the negative impacts of surveillance and promote the well-being and autonomy of international students. Several actions need to be taken. We need to review and reform surveillance policies on our campuses. We need to enhance data protection measures. We need to provide clear information to international students about how and why surveillance is conducted. I'm constantly telling my students, I need your address change or your phone number change within 10 days because that's the US law. And then I explain to them that, listen, they collect this data just to know where you are at all times, because they want to make sure that you're here on a visa and you're maintaining the status of that visa category, right? So we provide clear information for them. Let's offer legal and psychological support. Hamilton College has an attorney where that we have, that if students have legal questions, that they can contact that attorney and get questions, okay? And then we have psychological support. Let's establish services that offer legal advice and psychological support for international students who may feel stressed or anxious due to surveillance. Because like I said, it is stressful. Just imagine how you feel when people are constantly watching with a camera, you know? Let's involve students in a dialogue. I am heavy on this. Create forums for international students to voice their concerns, and then participate in discussions about campus surveillance policies. We need to engage the students that we are surveilling on our campuses, okay? Then let's conduct impact assessments. Let's regularly conduct assessments to understand how surveillance practices are affecting international students, and then make adjustments based on the findings. Let's foster an inclusive environment. Let's promote activities that foster inclusion and cultural understanding so that we can reduce the othering that can lead to undue scrutiny of international students. Then let's not just stay on campus. Educate the campus community. Launch an educational campaign to inform the campus community about the diverse backgrounds of international students, aiming to dismantle stereotypes that may lead to targeted surveillance. There are a lot of stereotypes, no matter which country you're from. Everybody has an opinion about somebody from another country, right? So let's create an educational component to what we do and launch this campaign and be in the community. We need to be visible. Then we also need to develop what I'll call a privacy education program. Let's educate students about digital privacy and security so we can empower them to protect their own information online. You will notice that this generation of students are technology kids. They're always online. They start with one social media platform. When the adults get there, you notice the student exit, they pick another platform. The adults follow them there, they exit, they pick another platform. I can't even keep up. I thought Facebook was it, so my kids told me it's not Facebook, it's now Instagram. And then I get on Instagram, oh no, nobody goes to Instagram, they're for old people. Now we've moved to TikTok, or they've moved to Snapchat, or they moved to, I mean, it's everywhere. Something is now called Telegram. We need to keep up. We need to keep up with these students. And we need to make sure they understand that what you put on social media can come back and bite you, okay? America is preparing for an election, in our next election. And some members of a party already, of the Republican Party, are already saying that, you know, when they get into office, you know, all these people that are making comments on social media will be dealt with, right? I've warned my international students, if you have an opinion, you keep it to yourself. You don't go on social media and start writing things, okay? Because anything you write on social media, even if you delete it, becomes permanent record. This generation does not understand that. We need to educate them, okay? Let's encourage advocacy. Support and encourage student-led advocacy group that work towards more equitable surveillance practices and protections of student rights. Students can be very active. This generation of students are very active. Let's encourage them to be their advocates for their own selves, okay? Again, we need to encourage transparency in reporting. So maintain transparency in reporting and use of surveillance data, and allow for independent oversight to ensure accountability. Let's not just collect data just to collect it. Let's be transparent in why we're collecting it, and explain to students, because students may push back and say, well, rather than collecting this data, would this data help? You know, let's get the ideas, but be transparent about what we're doing. Let's not hide behind, oh, we need this for a database, but you never say what you need it for. It's not just to contact you. If I'm asking for your phone number, it's not just to contact you. It's also for when USCIS or the immigration the area wants to contact you for whatever problem. Okay, it's to maintain to keep national security. Let's say what it is. Okay, and then let's promote autonomy in academic work. Encourage approaches that respect students' autonomy and confidentiality, especially in research and academic work that may involve sensitive data. I think by implementing these actions and more that you guys might share with me, that institutions can help mitigate the negative effects of surveillance and create a more supportive, autonomous environment for international students. So I have done a lot of talking. It's time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, I don't know if you want to come off mic, turn on your camera, or you want to put it in chat. Either way, I can. I'm okay with it, and I can try to answer your questions. I have a shy group today. It's funny, when we're teaching, we want students to answer questions or volunteer, but I always tell the faculty members here that, you know, we are equally guilty. I've been in workshops too, to say any questions, and I do have the question, but I don't want to be the first one to ask, you know, or I feel like maybe I can type it rather than saying it. So I do understand, but if anything that I presented hits a nerve, or you have an idea that I didn't cover, or you have questions about what I said, maybe what I just presented does not apply in your respective countries, wherever you're logging in from. Let's talk about it. Because, hey, I don't know, it may be a US thing, you know, even though I've traveled to many other countries where I feel like I'm being surveilled. I'm at the airport and I can see cameras everywhere. I'm at the airport and I can see signs that say, do not be on your cell phone, right? And I still see people on their cell phone. Then I can see an officer come in and say, no, you need to turn your cell phone on. All of that is surveillance, all of it. And how does that affect us? You know, and we're not talking about us, but I'm asking you, how does that affect you? Because if it affects you anyway, then just imagine how it affects international students in your classrooms. So I welcome questions, please.
Absolutely. There's one on the chat box from Nina. Dr. Boniket says, how would you strike a balance so that everyone feels safe with regards to data and behavior on social and forums?
Nina, I'm still trying to figure that out, okay? Because there needs to be, I think when we're talking to students and for adults, because I see some adults do that, but when we're talking to students, not everything needs to be on social media, right? We have to think about the mental effects of social media. We need to remember and see social media as something that when you put it out there, even if you delete it, it's still there. So we caution ourselves, right? We practice restraint when we put something out there. It's okay to take pictures of where you went this weekend and the fun you had spending time with your family, right? That's okay. But then there's some things that are probably not okay. And I guess the question is, who determines what's okay and what not okay? I will always ask myself, can I stand by what I just posted? If this comes back, can I adequately defend what I just put out there? My colleague that I work with here says to me all the time, she says, you know, Bonike, we can't fully be our authentic self in this environment. And I had to think, you're right. No matter which environment you're in, you can't really be your authentic self because of surveillance. So how do we now strike that balance? I guess you read the room, meaning you look at your environment. If you're an international student in a country, then you don't go on social media and start attacking that country that's a host to you, right? If you're in a country that is highly censored, then you watch what you put out there. You don't criticize your government, knowing that it can come back and bite you if there are rules and regulations against that. So I think individuals need to practice restraints as it applies to them. America will tell you that we have freedom of speech. I beg to differ, because if you post something inappropriate on social media or something that somebody else deems inappropriate, it can affect your job. Employers now look at your social media channel before they even interview you. What kind of person is this? So I think that question, Nina, will be, I think that's an individual thing where we censor ourselves and we have to ask ourselves, can I stand behind what I just posted or what I just shared or what I just commented on, what I just liked? I think depending on your situation and where you're located, we have to read the room. All right, so I see a question that said, what initiatives have students responded well to within your work? You mentioned a few calls to action. I'm curious how those have worked at your college. I think part of what works is transparency. Transparency has worked well here, especially with international students. When I'm looking through a database and I don't see a phone number, I'm looking through the CVIS platform, which is the system we use to report to immigration, and I don't see a phone number, and I contact the student by email and say, I need your phone number. I've had students ask me why you can reach me by email. Then I had to explain, listen, the reason we're collecting this is the USCIS requires that we put this information in there, and they need it as part of their national security measures, right? So I'm explaining, I'm being transparent, right? Students have access to their data. So if a student wants to see what we put into CVIS, I can print that out. Majority is what's already on their document that we call the I-20, but if they want it, I can provide that. We've provided legal and psychological support. Students respond very well to the legal support, right? When they have questions and legal questions, while I may know the answer, I'm not a legal expert. So I defer to the attorney that we've retained. And the attorney helps them with their questions. And they responded well to that, especially when they get to the time when they want to apply for H-1B visas, they want to change their status, all of that. The legal counsel has helped them. International students have not responded very well to psychological support. I think it's cultural. So a lot of international students do not take the initiative to go seek psychological support or counseling, right? They manage stress differently, which may be unhealthy at times, but what I've done for that is in my office, I have in my building, I'm sorry, I have an empty office where we have community members come there to use the office. Sometimes if you're tired of your office, you can come into that office and just change environment. I also use that office for students. So if a student needs to talk to a counselor and they don't want to walk into the counseling center because it's so obvious that it's a counseling center, then they'll come here, and we've partnered with the counseling center on campus to say, you can meet with these students by Zoom. That way nobody knows that they're seeking psychological support. And I found the resistance in international students. I don't typically see that in traditional students, in US students, but a lot of international students do not respond very well to psychological support, especially if they have to initiate it. But they feel comfortable talking to me in my office. And because I'm not a psychological expert, I'll tell them, listen, you don't have to go there. I'll make the connection. You can come into my office. I have a private office here where you can go in and meet by Zoom. So they haven't always responded very well to every action, but we keep educating. My biggest challenge has been fostering an inclusive environment. So while I do promote activities that foster inclusion and cultural understanding to reduce the othering, we're not there yet. Okay, it's still a challenge, because what you're doing is you're educating students who have families that think otherwise, right? So I'm trying to have students unlearn certain unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy stereotypes. So it takes a while. I'm not quite there yet. Fostering an inclusive environment, we're trying. You know, a lot of times students, international students, don't want to participate because they feel like it's not working anyway. No matter what we're doing, we still feel like the other. So we're challenged there, but we're not stopping. As educators, we keep providing the fostering the environment. I do things like, I had international students from China complain to me that the food in the dining hall that they consider Asian food is not Asian food, and it's definitely not Chinese food. That's American Chinese food. And they're bothered, right? Now, and I've had colleagues say, well, they knew they were coming to the United States, so, you know, they should eat American food. Wrong. We asked them to be open to other foods. However, that does not mean that we put something together and just slap the name Chinese food on there. No. So part of advocating as an educator is, you know, working with the dining service to say, listen, maybe once a month, maybe you can hire an authentic chef, somebody from China, authentic chef to come in and cook, even if it's just once a month. We need to let these students know that we want to include them, and we want to use that as an opportunity to educate the other students, right? So there are impactful things that we can continuously do, but I'm not going to say that all of these has worked or all of these are working. I'll say that we keep practicing that, and I'm open to more suggestions on what we can do. I hope that helped, Mariella. Any other questions?
Anything else that the audience would want to share? Maybe, you know, the kind of initiatives that you can take up now as a part of learning from this webinar. Any takeaways?
Yeah, Mariella, advocacy is at the core of our work as international educators. If we think we're just coming in and we're assisting international students on our campus and keeping them in compliance, then we're wrong. My dissertation was about students viewing us as compliance officers rather than student services administrators. And my dissertation asked the question about how do we as international educators balance that? On one part, we are compliance officers, right? At least in my role, I'm hired to make sure the institution and students remain in compliance with the Department of Homeland Security. But I'm an educator. I'm an international student services administrator, right? And I want students to come to me when they feel like they've been isolated or they haven't been included. I need them to talk to me about their problems when they're missing home or when there's an issue on campus. But if they see me as another immigration officer, it's a problem. So we as international educators have to balance, but I feel like at the core of what we do is advocacy. We have to advocate. And it's not going to be easy, but I'm known on campus. I'm advocating for international students. All students matter, but my international students is what I'm hired to do, and that's what I advocate for. So I'm okay ruffling a few feathers on campus, but I need my international students to feel like they belong here because they do belong. And maybe it helps that I'm actually not from the US, so it helps advocate for them because I feel their pain.
Yeah, it's so important to put yourself in their shoes sometimes and
Absolutely.
get to.
And if you've never traveled out of the country, and you've never interacted with someone from another country, it's very difficult to see that there are problems on our campuses. Very, very difficult. But if you've traveled a lot and you've interacted with people from other countries, then you understand when there's an injustice on your campus. Absolutely. You understand the surveillance and how it can have an impact. You know, I tell my international students, you can't work more than 20 hours a week, right? Because that's what USCIS says. But all other students can't relate. They can work up to 40 hours. So we're constantly implementing surveillance methods that unless you've traveled or you're well versed in immigration, you don't understand. So I think it's extremely important that we as international educators leave our comfort zones and get out of the country once in a while.
Oh, that really makes sense, actually. Again, like experiencing before you give them the experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions for me?
Okay. I think there's one from Christopher.
Christopher, I don't know if there are websites. I know if we do a Google search, which is not scholarly, by the way, but if we do a Google search, I'm sure that we can come across articles that people have written about surveillance. I don't know if there's a lot there. When I was doing my dissertation, it was really hard to find American articles because I am in the US. So it's difficult for me to find articles by American authors that talked about surveillance the way, from the lens that I saw it, which is from the lens of Michael Foucault, who's a French philosopher. So I had to go outside of the US and look at foreign journals and see what other people in other countries have said about surveillance and I applied it to the US context. So I don't have a specific website for people to go to, but I do think that resources would be journal articles, international education journal articles, not by American authors as much, but I see a lot in Canada, in Britain. I see a lot of those authors that are writing about surveillance, especially using Michael Foucault as a lens, his philosophy as a lens. I see a lot there. In the US, we're not there yet, so there's not that many. And I had that challenge when I completed my dissertation, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I personally believe that if there are no articles or websites, talking about it, when it comes like from the horse's mouth, it really makes so much sense. So I believe that there's a lot of insights that you've been able to give all of us today. And I'm sure that each of the participants has their own takeaway from the session. And I believe this is definitely going to be useful in preparing the students for the future, because now we are able to foresee what are the kind of challenges that the students face when it comes to surveillance. I really love the way you've been able to talk about the ground level realities for international students with so many examples, so many strategies that you were able to talk about, like promoting cultural understanding, providing them the psychological support. I believe that really calls for skill building like emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and that too from a very young age.
Mhm.
I understand that there is always a challenge once they face it in reality, to support the students at college level. However, as educators, we have been taking that one step. I believe everybody is here with that idea to take that little one step to be able to start supporting the students at a very young age.
Mhm.
And participants, in case you are looking for any kind of support from your partner in education, Shimanli, then you can please write to us at collaborate@shimanli.com. And if there are no more questions, I think I would like to thank Dr. Bonike on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of Shimanli. Thank you so much for taking us through this. Really was insightful for me, and I'm hoping the same for all the other participants.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I appreciate everyone paying attention with my constant talking. I hope you took at least one thing away that you can implement as an international educator. And let's not give up the fight. It's going to be a long haul, but we are well equipped for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you again, Dr. Bonike, for your valuable contribution. And thanks to all the participants. We'll come back once again with some more sessions like these. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Mhm.